So wrapping up Gaines Mill from the Civil War Brigade series. It basically would have been, I think, a much bigger Confederate victory had the Confederates not been plagued by some terrible die rolls. The worst, which was, first of all, the delay in Longstreet moving his division to Gaines Mill, which is over here. It took him a while to get there, and then he did accept his orders pretty quickly, but then ended up rolling a corps attack stoppage before he could actually get his attack underway. And he was never able to, and you know, he was already getting here late enough in the day as it was, but on top of that, then he was never able to get out of delay status. Once he, or it took him forever to get out of delay status once he got to Gaines Mill, which took long enough as it was, and then he was plagued with corps attack stoppage once he in fact did get the attack started. Started taking some losses from this artillery here, and was never able to either get initiative or re-implement orders. Once he entered the corps attack stoppage, I issued him new orders. Those ended up in delay status, and then it took forever to get out of delay status. In fact, as of 6:00 p.m., he was still in delay status. That leaves only 2 more turns before dark to even get an attack off. At this point, Jackson, in fact, had actually launched his attack and started his attack, and he's a 0 rated commander. He was able to have more success than the much higher rated Longstreet was. He ended up, as you can see here, the Union position originally ran all the way through Old Cold Harbor and kind of around to here, and Jackson's attack just staved in the entire right end of the Union line, completely eliminated one Second Corps unit. That would be Caldwell's brigade, and then severely damaged the Irish brigade here. This is Marr, the only Union brigade that had an A rating, A morale rating. I think it was the only one. Possible there was another. What I did with my sheets, I believe. No, there was another. There was two other A-rated brigades. Buchanan, who was a 5th Corps brigade, along with. There. So Buchanan, this was an A-rated brigade here. And then in addition to Marr with the Irish brigade, there was also Gibbon's brigade. He was at one time a commander of the Iron Brigade. So maybe that is the Iron, well, no, because the Iron Brigade was formed, that was part of the Army of Virginia at Second Bull Run, so that was after this, so they weren't down there. So I'm not sure who Gibbon was commanding at the time. It was, what, 3rd Brigade of the 3rd Division of the 1st Corps, so, which I don't believe is on the map here. 1st Corps was not here. It was only 2 divisions of the division of the 2nd Corps and a division of the 6th Corps, so that showed up here as reinforcements. Otherwise, it was all 5th Corps. Regardless, this, and then there was French's brigade here. He had the largest brigade, but was a C morale, so these guys were shaken pretty early and pushed back, and so so Jackson hit with intense force, and I think would have kept going and you know, inflicted more casualties had his had these 2 divisions not also suffered a corps attack stoppage. Ewell's division suffered a corps attack stoppage pretty early because all 3 of his brigades were pretty quickly wrecked since they launched the attack on the end of the Union line, and took the heaviest hits from this artillery here. You can see here Winder's division was able to get farther around the Union flank and only had to contend with really some of the Irish Brigade and then French's brigade here, and so inflicted a lot of damage on these guys before they ended up falling prey to the corps attack stoppage, just because they had a couple of brigades that took some heavy losses here. The LA and LB brigades took some pretty heavy losses, and then Whiting also suffered a corps attack stoppage, and so that this was the best chance that the Confederates had to really roll up the Union line. Had Longstreet been able to launch his attack over here, we would have seen he would have just punched right through, and it would have been a massacre. The Union was just stretched too thin. One thing that I learned was that clearly shouldn't have tried to hold the road here. Should have just taken the Union position in a tight ball here around Turkey Hill, maybe over here to keep the McGee Farm, which is a victory point location. So maybe just followed this kind of track for the Union position to try and make it as tight and narrow as possible, and make the Confederates, if they wanted to get around on it, have to trudge through this heavy forest and stream terrain here to get to them to buy more time, because the way it was here, the Union line was just too thin. Leaving a brigade here and there to act as behind the line to act as a support wasn't even enough. Down in here at the left end, you can see the left end of the line also largely wrecked, as D.H. Hill, his division was wrecked early on, and kind of out of the action pretty quickly from a corps attack stoppage. But A.P. Hill carried on through the end, even though by the end of the fight, every single one of his brigades was wrecked. He still was not failing his corps attack stoppage rolls. So he continued to attack, and you can see here, this is all that's left of A.P. Hill's division. He lost 3 brigades that were destroyed entirely. So that's what happens when you don't get a corps attack stoppage. You just keep throwing your guys into the meat grinder until you got nothing left, and that's what happened to him. So he did punch through the Union line. I had to throw in some already wrecked 6th Corps brigades. Yeah, Newton. No, I don't think it was Newton. It was somebody here. Bartlett, I think, is here. No. Back here. Yeah. I was having to throw in Bartlett back here, who was already wrecked, just to try and stem the tide as A.P. Hill's brigades broke through. But once he did, I had reestablished some artillery fire back here, because this line originally was way up here. I had reestablished some artillery fire back here, and they ended up just annihilating, along with these more fresh Union brigades, or fresher Union brigades, ended up annihilating the brigades, the A.P. Hill brigades that did break through. So, but again, it was a near-run thing down here too, where the Confederates had the possibility of punching through the line and getting around behind other units. So as you can see, Longstreet has a massive division here, and these guys would have just rolled right through. They would have taken some big hits from all this artillery, but nonetheless, you just charge them close combat, and the fresh troops would have just blown right through the stretched Union line, which you can see here is all operating in line extensions. So I think had Longstreet not had the problems that he would have, it would have been pretty much a rout of the Union position, probably by midday or so. But without Longstreet there to stretch the Union reserves even further, it ended up what it was, which when I stopped at 6 o'clock, it was at a decisive Union victory, and this is mainly based on casualties. The Confederates can pick up a decent number of points on victory point locations, which they did. They picked up 6 points off of victory point locations. Probably, had Longstreet been successful, they probably could have picked up, maybe not here, but probably they could have picked up the McGee Farm at the very least for 2 more. These 2 positions might have been the holdouts, so that would have been an extra 2 points there. The big problem for the Confederates was casualties. They had 106 losses which was 10 victory points for the Union right there. And then AP Hill, DH Hill, and Ewell's divisions were all wrecked, which was an additional 9 victory points for the Union for a total of 19. The Confederates inflicted 73 losses on the Union, which was worth 5 victory points. I think, had I played this out, had I played out the remaining 3 turns and potentially gotten either Longstreet back into the attack or reactivated Jackson, I could have inflicted a few more casualties on the Union. I think the cutoff was 93. Let's see. Confederate loss, the Union loss was, well, actually that was 10 points. So not a decisive Union victory. So if the Union had 73 losses, So the Union had 73 losses, and if they'd had 74 losses, it would have been 10 victory points instead of 5. So there was, the way it ended when I called it was the Union had 19 victory points and the Confederates had 11, which would have made for a -8 differential, which would be a decisive Union victory. I think, had I gotten somebody somewhere in the next 2 turns along the Confederate line could have gotten at least one more hit on a Union brigade, which would have bumped the Confederate victory margin up by 5 points, meaning it would have been actually, even to -8, it still would have been a minor victory, not a major. The Union major victory needed to be a -9 or less, I think. No, I'm looking at the wrong scenario. So this is the campaign scenario 1, 6.6, and a Union major victory here is a -8 or less, which is what the Union currently has. But again, had I played out these last 3 turns, I'm sure one of the Confederate units could have been reactivated, or I could have moved some artillery up to fire at the Union line to get them the one more casualty they would need to pip the Union losses from 73 to 74, which would have been a 5 victory point difference. So that would have made it a -3 had the Confederates gotten 5 more victory points from casualties, and that would have made it a Union minor victory. So historically, it was a draw, again, because the Confederates took a lot of losses, assaulting a pretty heavily defended Union position. But the Union had to abandon most of their strategic positions, but the 5th Corps was not completely destroyed, which was Lee's goal. So, here the Union did a little bit better than they did historically. And again, I attribute that entirely to Longstreet not being able to launch a full assault on this Union position. I think he got up within small arms fire range and was doing some damage, but taking a lot of damage from this artillery here. So I think particularly this brigade was heavily damaged, but these back here were all fresh, and 4 fresh brigades, the Union just didn't have the manpower to handle that extra attack. You can see the difference in numbers really told down here, where I thought, hey, I've got, good quality A and B, except for this guy, A and B rated Union troops at this end, but they just, the hits were coming so fast and furious that they just reached wrecked positions pretty quickly, with the amount of firepower that Jackson could bring to bear with the Army of the Valley. So that's what ended up happening at the end, and I have no doubt that the same thing would have happened here with Longstreet. The Confederates didn't have the success on this end of the line as they had on the other ends, mainly because the terrain here was a lot worse. They were firing up slopes a lot more. They had to get adjacent to even hit in a lot of cases because of the woods that were along here. So, and then the swamp prevented them from moving. And then also the exhaustion of the troops started to take a toll as well after a while. With AP Hills and DH Hills units I don't know about D.H. Hill. For certainly A.P. Hill, because he was moving a lot longer than D.H. Hill was. After D.H. Hill was out of it much earlier, before the exhaustion could really set in. But these guys were tired out, as were some of this PAR division of the Fifth Corps, also on the tired end of the scale. So they start taking morale modifiers and things like that when they get hit. So that is the reason that these two large divisions didn't just cave in this end of the Union line as well, although they still certainly did a lot of damage and pushed the Union well off of their original starting line. So the Union was able to hold and not end up routed completely. So they did a little better than they did historically. But again, I seriously don't think it would have gone that way had the Confederates not been so unlucky on their corps tax stoppage and order acceptance rolls. Just a real tough row to hoe for the Confederates in this battle, with Lee learning his way in his first major campaign to get his divisions to coordinate. So anyway, that is the end of Gaines' Mill, a minor Union victory or a decisive Union victory, depending on how long I would have played it out. I think really the minor Union victory was the best the Confederates would have been able to manage, even had I played through the last 3 turns of the game before it ended. So it was entertaining. I really loved the large scale of the maps. This is the biggest CWBS game I've played up to this point. I have not played a 3-mapper. I think even the Wilderness, the Bloody Road South, was still only a 2-mapper. So it was pretty cool having this range of maneuver for this battle. I haven't gotten to experience that in Civil War Brigade series fights before, so it was entertaining. I really enjoyed the kind of race for the Union to get out of the trap over here along the Beaver Dam Creek, with Jackson potentially coming in behind them. So that was pretty cool. Some nail-biting moments there, as the Union was literally just steps ahead of the Confederates to establish a new position along Boatson's Swamp. And that was an exciting part of the battle. Definitely turned into more of a slog once the two armies came into active engagement with each other, but that's just the nature of Civil War Brigade series. If you don't like rolling a lot of dice, and every single fire combat you do is going to roll 6 dice, and then you got to do multiple calculations with all those dice, and you're doing that 4 times every turn at least for each brigade and artillery unit on the map. Just makes for a very long, slow, grinding fight, and you either have the patience for it or you don't. I typically do, because I like to see, first of all, Civil War Brigade series allows you to fight a lot of battles that don't have games that allow you to fight them. I'm not sure of any other titles that actually cover the Battle of Gaines' Mill, but trying to think. I can't think of any. Maybe some magazine games have done it before, but if you want to play Gaines' Mill, Civil War Brigade series is pretty much your only choice. And so, you'll be doing the long grinding combat, but it does produce, a definite narrative outcome, and an interesting narrative typically, especially as you get the corps tax stoppage and the unpredictability of commanders refusing to accept orders, or commanders getting initiative, or as is what happened with Jackson. When I tried to give him initiative, you get the loose cannon roll, and he runs off in another direction. So, all kinds of interesting things can happen. The system is very rewarding, but you do have to have the patience to do a lot of die rolling and a lot of fire combat. It's just how the system's designed. But overall, enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to anybody who wants to do a serious study of Gaines' Mill or any of the 7 Days battles. You've got Seven Pines as well as part of the series, and Malvern Hill as the sort of capper, the final big battle at the end of the 7 Days battles. And all of them can be linked together to form one great big full 7 Days campaign, which I didn't really feel like attempting, just because I didn't want to tie up every single table in my game room for this one campaign. So, which it would have taken because the map layout for it is huge. So, anyway, someday I may do that, but I think I've had my fill for the time being of the 7 days, and we'll move on to some other stuff.